1,000 years ago, 3,000, 5,000, 10,000 years ago. When the tribe rejected us, it was like death. It was a sentence to death. And we need tribe. That's why the commune, the kibbutz, and the tribe, and these intentional communities are formed. And in order for it to survive, in order for you to even have a community, you need to learn how to communicate.
And good afternoon, everyone. I had so much positive feedback. Dan Schultz, moving into the positivity with the changes and offering solutions, discussing some of the problems and things that we're facing. And there's been such an uptick, even in the last 6 months since we went around our last interview here. But the problems we face are all in your face. And when I say that, it's not a slang term, in your face, but it's so obvious for everybody to see now that systems are broken. They're not being repaired. The systems that we know as were efficient are now inefficient. The delays, the economy, the inflation, the lack of food, which I'm going to talk about here with the fertilizer reductions coming in next year, which are absolutely going to impact yields globally. So we'll need to take some solutions for our self-sustainability on that. I was like, everywhere you look, you can see the facade has shattered, and it's kind of looking through a glass window now at the farce that has been the last 100 years of what we consider our society and commerce, the wastefulness around us, from government to NGO to so many other things that are now political pawns. And those who have eyes to see, as you mentioned, it's so obvious that there has to be a change. And I really believe that no later than probably the beginning of 2023, maybe at the very middle July of 2023, the perception of saving or planning for the future like we do now, save for your retirement savings. You're 30, you got to start thinking about retirement. That will no longer exist, even as a fleeting thought, as we get into the now for survival and moving through these vast changes of the grand solar minimum, the restructuring of governments, and the complete overhaul and restructuring of an economy, the global level economy. So with all these things that will be happening in short order here, the now will be a thing that everybody will live in versus into the future. I mean, when I say future, it might be near-term future, year, 2 years, but nothing as we look out 40, 50 years from now to try to get ready for living a dream, sitting on a beach, drinking margaritas when you're 30 versus using the money when you're 30 to go run around the beach as one of the super strong body and enjoy life to its fullest, versus waiting till you're 70 so you can go literally just sit on a beach because you're too old to go run around and enjoy climbing the mountains, jumping in the waterfalls, whatever that entails. So there's a lot of things happening. And the world, we know, is shifting right in front, and it's going to shift much more intensely in these next year. So, Dan, I'm glad you came back on. We were talking before the show about some fertilizer, and I wanted to pick your brain on that. So, welcome back. And how have you seen the world change even in the last 6 months? I mean, there's stark movements that are starting to appear more and more that can't be denied.
It can't be denied. And I really think it's beneficial to frame this in paradigm shifts. And paradigm shifts have been a theme in my life, but I think increasingly in everybody's life. There's so many. I mean, my biggest paradigm shift was going from allopathic thought to holistic thought, the medical model. We have a Surgeon General. You grow up, you take a baby aspirin when you have a fever, when you're a kid. You go to the doctor when you're sick. I mean, we live in a medical culture. And that changed for me when I found holistic thought was an awakening for me. But there's been so many. I mean, now we have going from a nuclear sun to plasma cosmology, from linear to cyclical, like we talk about quite a bit. I used to think I sang the Star Spangled Banner at my wedding. I was a red-blooded American who thought America was the greatest planet on the earth, or greatest country on the planet. And I'm a little embarrassed by that now. The paradigm has shifted. There isn't even America. There's oligarchs and corporations and the people that run the planet. America is a facade. There's so many. 9/11 was a paradigm shift, and I was duped like most people. I wanted to get those terrorists. I really did. I'm embarrassed to admit that. It took, some people showing me, hey, look at this, to see that 9/11 was a completely different scenario. When I had kids going from public schools to homeschool to unschooling, there's so many paradigm shifts, and maybe one of the biggest in my life and more applicable to what you and I are doing is at one time I was a fiercely competitive athlete. Winning was everything. It was everything. I didn't go to college to go to college. I went to college to go to the Olympics, and it was everything. And now it seems so silly. I remember being really important if the Raiders won. It seems so silly to me now. But this competitive to a cooperative paradigm is a big deal. This rugged independence to we're all in this together is more applicable than it has ever been. And I think at my Siskiyou Mountain Village, the way that shows up is we practice a paradigm shift in communication. So, do you know NVC by chance? Nonviolent communication?
No, maybe I do, but maybe by a different name. Explain that to me full. Can you flesh that out a little bit?
Yeah, it's Marshall Rosenberg's work. It's called Nonviolent Communication or Compassionate Communication. And it is an absolute paradigm shift when it comes to interpersonal communication. So I'm not going to give a seminar on it, but essentially what almost all of us have learned our entire life, we are steeped in it, is blame, labels, criticism, and analysis. If there's something that comes up, some type of conflict, I'm going to label you as lazy or inconsiderate or some label. Generally, we don't take responsibility for our emotions. We blame that person. They made me mad, right? That's what we learned. You made me mad. You hurt me. We don't take responsibility, and we don't give people responsibility for their own emotions. And so the technology of NVC, beautiful. We have 5 copies of the book. It's strongly suggested reading at our place, but we practice it on a weekly basis. And instead of blame, labels, analysis, and criticism, you learn it to be feelings and needs based. And it's a way of expressing, but it's so much more than that. It is a way for you, first of all, to completely take responsibility for your emotions, to give people responsibility for theirs. It's a way to resolve conflicts. And it's a way to get what you want. Like we all have the same needs, and we need to get those needs met. And so there are probably a lot of ways, communication technologies that you can get from point A to point B. In my estimation, NVC is, it's beautiful. And of all the things, we've had 350 woofers in our place. And of all the things that people write me back 6 months, 1 year, 2 years, 5 years later, they write me back and say what impacted them the most was our heart club that we practice every week. And they'll bring it to appreciations and withholds and admissions, acknowledgements, and the ability to share from the heart and build trust. Because as we've been talking about, as we go through all these changes, and as I argue, inevitably inevitably, the grid is going down. That is the inevitability that I see. There are a lot of permutations. The world is going to get colder. We're going to have climatic changes, extremes, but in the end, the grid is going down. I'll talk about that more later.
Yeah, for how long Dan, how long do you think it might go down? Grid down for me, 2 weeks, 1 month, 2 months. That's easy to overcome. Well, not easy, but doable. But a permanent or a multi-year grid down is something quite different to deal with.
They are very different, and we can't necessarily, be rigid in our expectations of all these different permutations of the crises that can happen. Everything's on the table. We've been surprised at just all the crap that's happened right now. But my point is that when these systems collapse, they're in free fall collapse right now. It might be a controlled demolition collapse, but essentially, we need to learn to work together. And having a community, we touched on this in the last podcast, that it's the people. You can't go it alone. The people that go it alone, the reason why we don't like rejection as a human being is because when our tribe rejected us 1,000 years ago, 3,000, 5,000, 10,000 years ago, when the tribe rejected us, it was like death. It was a sentence to death. And we need tribe. That's why the commune, the kibbutz, and the tribe, and these intentional communities are formed. And in order for it to survive, in order for you to even have a community, you need to learn how to communicate. So anyways, I'm always an advocate of, I won't go too far into NVC. I'm always an advocate. We touched on this a little bit last time, of books. You can't know everything. You cannot know everything. It's a lifelong journey of knowing. I'm an advocate of finding books on things. And one of my on the top 5 anyways, is Marshall Rosenberg's Nonviolent Communication. You can go on YouTube, watch some of the videos watching him use the tool of NVC. But when you can learn, and it's not easy. It sounds so easy. It sounds easy to communicate feelings and needs, and there are more nuances and subtleties to it. But it's something you have to practice. You have to practice being out of analysis, criticism, blame, and labels. You have to practice being in, listening with it, and speaking with it. And communities, our brains are made to trust. That was one of my insights into indigenous communities that I lived with. They trust each other inherently, implicitly. It is woven into the fabric of their culture. Everyone around them you trust. You and me and all of these other people around us, almost nobody knows that. I mean, maybe you got some great parents and your family's tight, but having a tribe, everyone around you that you trust, and our brain is made for that. So my point in this is that in America anyways, in most of the West, even the news will condition you out of that, out of trust. And we have to unlearn and relearn how to communicate in a way that builds cohesiveness and cooperation and trust. And then our brains and our lives will be right. And as I argue, to make it through all of these changes, we have to have that cohesiveness. David?
How fast can it turn on for the average person to unlearn and relearn what they do? Because these changes I'm talking about and you're seeing and the world's feeling, everybody feels intuitively. And again, they're coming back to the tribe and just the basic survival instincts. I think that's why nearly every person on the planet feels currently something's amiss. Now that is a survival instinct for us. We wouldn't still be here if we all didn't cohesively understand that there's a great impact coming, a great change. We all need to act together to move through it. So some of these, what we consider woo-woo topics of being able to sense things in the future, to sense things as a collective, It's all heightened and all turned on across every culture, every continent, across the entire planet. It's all happening at once right now, where people are just saying, something doesn't feel right. Maybe I should, and then fill in your action on the blank there.
Mhm.
Now, when people come together, how quickly will these old habits fall away? Because, a couple people out of my farm out here, and then what if 20 people show up, and then there's always going to be somebody trying to vie for power to be the leader, and those, even though it's your house and your farm, I'm going to be the leader, and even deciding daily tasks, because at that point, when calories are not going to be as easy to come by as just walking down to the supermarket and plunking your money down there, if it really comes down to the shortages that are envisioned, where things might cut off, grid, transportation systems, etc., lack of fertilizer coming in, that selection is going to be less, and it's going to be way more expensive. So the calorie burnt for an objective done, a task finished, to create more value or rebuild the food stocks, water, whatever it would be, lumber, anything, heat. For the wood, those task delegations, people are going to be arguing about, well, I don't want to do, well, we really, you have way more knowledge and experience with this. So I'm just asking, if at all, let's say things go haywire here in 3 to 4 months, and then people really do start looking for communities like yours and mine and Diamonds, and then Ben's over there, and there's a whole bunch of other ones around as well. So they're going to start finding and going to these places for safety. At that point, how quickly can it really be organized without a bunch of infighting from people who are traumatized from the changes and haven't expected, and truly blindsided, or it caught them so far off guard that psychologically they're going to be just in trauma anyway from all the changes, that it's just going to be devastating for most people coming into that situation, to readjust in a group to be able to make change and forward. I'm looking how these steps are going to unfold here. They might have to run from their houses in the middle of the night, leave everything behind, no cash, and roll up, please. Then what? How are people really going to change?
You make an excellent point. And I'm not against leadership. I'm not against being a leader. But you know this as well as I do. There's different ways to lead. Even in relationship, there can be an emotional leader. There can be someone with vision. There can be people who know foraging and different expertise. And it's the new math of 1 + 1 + 1 + 1 = 17. When everybody steps up and are empowered. I mean, that's just it. That was that was a theme when I learned allopathic to holistic. The allopathic model is one of dependence. It's one of disempowerment. Oh, you've got allergies. Take this antihistamine and you're dependent on it the rest of your life. And let's treat the symptom, and you have to rely on me to. And then you have the holistic model that is all about empowering people. It's about you healing yourself. And the same way with community, if everybody is empowered. Now, you're making a good point here, how quickly, especially in crisis. But you know what? In a crisis scenario, boom, everybody's scared. Yes, maybe somebody steps up and is an emotional leader in some way, or leaders in other ways. But in the end, in order to stay together, you have to practice. You have to practice it. It's not going to turn around in a week. I've been practicing NVC for almost 12 years now. Old habits of blame, label, criticism, and analysis are tough to get away from. I fail regularly, but I practice it and I come back to it. And in the end, to me, it is an absolute truth that when we are all empowered and we're working cooperatively, we build trust, we build cohesiveness, we are going to survive and be efficient. I wrote an article for Communities Magazine called Humanity versus Efficiency. Like, you're right. Hey, we could disagree on David wants to put the compost bin 20 feet over there, and I want it 20 feet over here. Well, and maybe you just, we talk about it, you just don't feel heard. Maybe we need to process that. That can be inefficient. You feel somebody feels insecure, or they feel slighted in the conversation. It's not efficient. Dictatorship is efficient. communist. The Chinese Communist Party is efficient, but
well, somebody might have a more efficient way. Okay, well, if you're going to do this much, then the radius from here, because most of the look, there's 17 trips to this part over here and only 3 trips to there, and the way you go save 200 steps each way, and think how many calories that is. We could do math behind it, you know.
Right. And you know what? In the long haul, considering people as human beings, including them as human beings, and coordinating as human beings, sometimes takes. I mean, that's why at our Heart Club meeting that we have weekly, we have an opportunity to express what's true for us and what kind of feelings and needs are being met, and it's both cathartic. We get to be human beings, and we get to know each other better and understand what makes us tick. And I think in the end, one of the things that's designed to build is empathy. How can you really have a great human experience and empathy? We live in a sociopathic society. I listened to a whole tape series once about sociopaths. It was really disturbing to me. Like, 1-2% of the population, some people say 3% of the population, are sociopaths. And I thought, I've never met a sociopath. And by the time I was done listening to it, I thought, am I a sociopath? My friend told me, sociopaths don't worry about being a sociopath. But
yeah, it's everybody on TV that you see is one.
Yeah, well, and politicians, and we live in a sociopathic society, and that rubs off on us in certain ways. We become numb because of the news. And in order to really embrace our humanness and the tribe, empathy, and for me, it's NVC. It's nonviolent communication. So some type of practice that we get, we can't just be worker bees. We're not bees. We're human beings. And we're not only human beings, but we're human beings that have been trained, for all of us in America, where we don't even know our neighbors, let alone trust them. And that just has to be built. It's something that has to be practiced and built.
And I'll say for sure that people gardening together, having so much fun, tilling the soil, putting the thing, getting all watered down. That is something that bonds everybody together. And so far, every time it's been planting or harvesting or something, it's just been a bunch of laughs, a bunch of joy together, people helping. I just really, planting is one of the things that, I don't know what it is. Everybody comes together and there's no arguing or anything. Except maybe like, hey, make sure you don't put the rake down that way so you step on it, hit you in the face like a cartoon character or something. But otherwise, planting is just everybody's just so tuned in at that point because the hands are in the soil. Sometimes people taking their shoes off and the decompressing and those kind of energies that don't normally leave our bodies. For most, I would say a majority of the people living in the United States, very few people walk out barefoot onto their own land that's, like you say, mountainous. Like you have a fair few acres, I have some acreage. Most people are in a city with rubber shoes on all the time, and they get all angsty, and it's really difficult to decompress some of that energy by allowing or rolling, just laying on the grass and allowing these energies to come out. But I find that when planting, getting that charge out of your body by the earth itself, and people putting hands in the soil and the smells of the soil, something real primal about that. And not a lot of people get that are living in cities or even in suburbs that come on out to help or whatnot.
In our place, it's firewood. That's kind of our community.
Yeah, building fire, that's another hugely amazing thing. You get a small fire starting, we need some more wood. And they'll go not miles around, but they'll go like sweeping the periphery of the property, looking for pulling stuff. I was burning it. Yeah, the fire is primal too.
Yeah. But you talk about this a good bit. I'm speaking to the maybe 30, 40, 50% of the audience that isn't sure what's going to happen. Well, in a lot of ways, we're all not sure. But this is I'm about this whole management of a situation. I'm very practical, and I'm very humanist. And the practical part of me says, when you look at the patterns, the cycles and the patterns, there are lots of things that could happen. You've got you talk about the gas giants being in one part of the solar system, it changes the magnetic field. You know, the big pattern, the biggest pattern is that our magnetosphere is declining. It's not only declining, it's not declining on a linear, it's declining on a parabolic pace. That means an acceleration. We're already 25%, about 25% down from 1859 in the Carrington event. What this means, if you don't, I mean, it's solid science too. This isn't like two people drinking moonshine in Tennessee who are on a discussion forum. This is solid science. Ben Davidson highlights this. You can go through the scientific paper after scientific paper. The evidence is clear. Our magnetosphere is waning. This is a big deal. This very well may be a bigger deal than the grand solar minimum. And the declining magnetosphere inevitably means that even an M-class solar flare, a small solar flare, will melt every copper wire on the planet. That sounds hyperbole, maybe to some, like, oh, I'd melt every copper wire. You know, the 1859 event, Carrington event, ignited telegraph wires all over the United States, shocked the operators. We would have been sent in the Stone Age on average. What is it, like 140, 150 years, we get one of those X-class solar flares. That's just a natural event that happens on a regular basis on average. We're already overdue for a Carrington event. It could happen tomorrow on a natural basis. When you add in some country could blow off EMPs and completely take down our grid, that's real. We're on a war cycle. I mean, there's cycles for everything. When Taurus when Uranus transits Taurus, astrologically, we have a war. 84-year cycle. 84 years ago, we had World War II. 84 years before that, we had the Civil War. 84 years before that, we had the Revolutionary War. So we're on that.
And where do we sit today in that transit?
Oh, big time.
In the same bullseye zone, don't we?
Same bullseye zone.